Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With us today, we have Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you.
Good morning, Dr. Paul. How are you this morning?
Doing well.
Good.
We have a little bit of news to talk about. It's not the end of the world, or
not yet.
I guess if some of these clowns are involved in politics, some of them almost look like they're contriving for that.
Yeah, no kidding.
But anyway, the news out, which could turn into a big deal, and that is that RFK Jr. Is probably going to join in and help Trump.
Yeah.
And his statement was he was not for Kamala.
Yeah.
And even though Kamala wanted to steal some thunder a week ago during the rumor sessions that, he came to us, he wanted a position, but we're really not interested in that or something. So they dismissed it. But anyway, this, if you're a real strong Trump supporter on a short term, this could amount to something, pretty significant for Trump. And, what I really hope for is when you have people getting together and they're agreeing on this, but they're not 100% on the issues. Well, from our viewpoint, we'd like to say, well, let's pick out what Robert says, and then let's pick out what Trump has said and put them together. Now they have a advisor type Tulsi with Trump, and she's been friendly toward what we've been doing too. So maybe it'll become more of an issue campaign. But no, I thought this was pretty good, and I imagine they'll have 1,000 polls over this in the next couple of days. But I can't see how it could be negative, but it's bound to have somebody write something very negative about it, and we have to wait and see.
Well, third-party candidates. He started out in the Democratic Party, and he was getting some traction, and they played all these dirty tricks on him, if you remember. Everything to keep him out of the debates, keep him away from everything, because they did not want to have an election. They wanted to anoint someone, and we know that because they've already done that. Now, at the time it was Biden, but everyone realized Biden couldn't do it. But what they wanted to do was keep him out, and that's what they did. So he quit the party, and he ran as an independent, and he and his running mate, Nicole Shanahan, they were doggedly going across the country, and every step of the way, the Democratic Party did everything it could to keep them off the ballot. And he even commented himself, I think, the party that is talking about how democracy is on the ballot this year did everything to keep people from voting for me. Now, put up this first one. This is the speculation that's all over. This is just one that we saw on Hedge. RFK to endorse Trump on Friday morning. That's what they say might be happening. As we speculated earlier, RFK Jr. indeed plans to end his independent presidential campaign and endorse former President Donald Trump. NBC News reported, citing two sources familiar with the plans. He announced that he will give a speech, his path forward, on Friday in Phoenix. Trump's going to be in Phoenix or around Phoenix that same day. So from the same article, now here's a speculation, Dr. Paul. We don't know what has been agreed, but it has certainly been bandied about that this endorsement, for this endorsement, he may get a cabinet position. Now, Trump hasn't exactly said that, but that's at least what people are speculating. Put on that next clip, because here's from the same article a couple of speculations about it. Now, this is Trump talking about RFK. I would love that endorsement because I've always liked him. When asked if he would also consider him to the administration, Trump responded, quote, I like him a lot. I respect him a lot. I probably would if something like that would happen. He's a very different kind of guy, very smart guy, and I would be honored by that endorsement, certainly. And go to the next one and here's a little bit more of Trump talking about RFK. He's a brilliant guy, smart guy. I've known him a long time. I didn't know he was thinking about getting out, but if he's thinking about getting out, I'd certainly be open to it, i.e. giving him a position. And now here's speculation from Zero Hedge. On Friday, we will learn if RFK Jr. is also open to it, with some speculating that RFK would make a great head of Trump's CIA, which would be ironic considering what the CIA did to JFK.
Yes.
So what do you think about that?
I think a lot about it cautiously.
Yeah.
Because the first thing is that it points out there's a commonality between RFK and Trump.
Yeah.
they don't get along with Secret Service. Secret Service, here they denied us, the protection of Robert K. He's sort of qualified considering who all the people are that get protection. And also they didn't do a very good job on Trump, so they do have something in common there. But I think this is going to be very interesting, but they do have to be alert. And it is a sort of fascinating, the point you point out, that put them ahead of the CIA. But you know what? I have so little confidence in the CIA and the FBI that you can't weed them out. I mean, I think it's those are institutions that, and I don't deny the people who know some people in the FBI and are decent and they've always tried to do a job. I remember one time, one of the first time, I was still a medical resident, they said, well, there's somebody down at the front desk from the FBI and they want to see you. Here was a relative. He says, oh yeah, I just got a sign here, so he looked me up. But I don't think it's that way anymore because I think there's too much corruption there, and they must get their orders from somebody else. But it is really a crime that I remember something that an old conservative told me once. He says, if you have a CIA, and they have this authority that we have, and this was way before the big assassination, he says, you cannot have a republic. Because it's secret government, and they all of a sudden are superior. And if they don't behave, they get eliminated. So sad story.
Well, the other speculation is that he might be put in some sort of a position as a health czar or something in that area, which would be interesting considering the fact that, certainly when it came to the COVID scam, he was very vocal from the beginning. I mean, RFK Jr., very vocal. In a way, that would sort of be an admission. That would sort of be by Trump making up for what he did to us by agreeing to the shutdowns, by putting RFK in some sort of a health position, because he has very interesting views in a sort of broad spectrum of the health in the U.S.
But, some of them never give up. I heard a liberal congressman talking the other day that the terms he used were like, Trump was the cause of 70,000 deaths because of his position on COVID. COVID, he doesn't have what we see as perfect, because we knew some people that were tipping off everybody in the medical community, and they were getting fired and everything else. So that was one thing. But I think this is I think it would be very scary. I like to see, but that's where you can have a bully pulpit, though. To at least, but if you're in Trump, is good at that. If he gets a few talking points, and he should stick to the civil liberties, not being against any of that stuff. But it was that has to be the worst thing our organized medicine has ever done in this country, and it's not been perfect in many ways.
And he spoke out from the beginning. He was canceled over it, So and the other thing about RFK Jr. Now, I liked his campaign. I did not like his position in the Middle East, and that's what turned me off and why I didn't get more involved. But nevertheless, he has shown years and years as an attorney, filing lawsuits, fighting polluters, fighting the bad guys out there on the environment. I mean, someone like him inside the administration who will go after the bad guys, that could be quite interesting, I think.
Yeah, and a lot of Republicans are hesitant at times not to go after anybody in business. The business is Republican. We got to make profits, and that's true in a lot of ways, because some honest Republican people, when they get real successful, they get hit hard, by the Democrats, to restrain them. But when you look at medicine and the pharmaceutical industry, and he would have the details that not many people know about, and the thing that has bothered me in recent years is the pricing system in there. I think there's a manipulation between government and the pharmaceutical. Every once in a while, they'll come up with a shortage. Oh, we don't have any more adrenaline. We can't make adrenaline. Now, in the marketplace, a relative amount of freedom would not have you a shortage with adrenaline. It's just so foolish.
Well, RFK was in New York, I think yesterday, because they kicked him off the ballot, and he had to fight to get on the ballot because the Democrats kicked him off because they love democracy so much. I put on this next clip now. This is a quote from RFK in New York, in the court in New York. If we can, now here he is after his court hearing. He said, "I thought it went really well." He's talking about the court hearing. "I shouldn't be here right now. The DNC is in Chicago talking about their commitment to voting rights while they're spending tens, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars to keep me off the ballot." He said, "There's 1 million people in this country who have signed petitions trying to get me on the ballot. 145,000 at least people here in New York State. They want to see me on the ballot. Why is the Democratic Party trying to disenfranchise these people? What happened to the party? I don't think my father would recognize the party, and I don't think my uncle would recognize this party," meaning the Democratic Party.
Well, they made up with it by being meticulous and following democracy and picking their candidate for president. That's pretty bad, but that has been said. But it doesn't bother them.
Yeah.
In our estimation, we'd probably do a little bit of explanation that in a way democracy can be very negative. When you go with a dictatorship, is all you have to do is get 51% and mobilize them and have the demagogues get them motivated. But I think this is I think there's going to be a lot more fun. With this, at least people speaking out. That's sometimes just one or two people speaking out can stir things up. Oh, a bit of truth. What are we going to do with it?
Make it illegal. Well, I think one of the bright. I think we both share this view. One of the bright spots of the RFK candidacy was his choice for Vice President Nicole Shanahan. Now, she's been on our program. You've been on her program. You met with her privately at first, back when we were at the LP, I think, convention. And I admit, at first, when she was named, I thought, what is he doing? It's only because she's super rich, But having met her and talked to her and listened to her, I think she's, and I've tweeted about this, I think she's a very bright person. We met with someone at Mises, I won't say his name because it was a private conversation. He was also very impressed with her. I have a little clip of her explaining what the Democratic Party did to their campaign. If we can play that first minute of Nicole Shanahan on a recent interview, I think this will tell you everything you need to know, A, about what's happening in democracy, but B, about how impressive Nicole is. You might want to put your earpiece in and listen to her talk.
Start this campaign, I did not put in tens of millions of dollars to be a spoiler candidate. I put in tens of $millions to win, to fix this country, to do the right thing. I will say that Clear Choice, this PAC, this DNC aligned PAC that was created specifically to take us out, has spent millions of dollars to take us out. They have unfortunately turned us into a spoiler. And we don't want to be a spoiler. We wanted to win. We wanted a fair shot. The DNC made that impossible for us. They have banned us, shadow banned us, kept us off stages, manipulated polls, used lawfare against us, sued us in every possible state. They've even planted insiders into our campaign to disrupt it and to create actual legal issues for us. I mean, the extent by which the sabotage.
Yeah, so pretty bad.
If they don't put RFK on anything, I think she should be a pretty good candidate.
No,
she speaks well.
And she's coming around a lot, on a lot of issues. The thing about, we talked about before the show, the thing about RFK and Nicole and Tulsi is that you may not agree with all of their principles, but they're about principles over party. And that makes them a heck of a lot better than either the Republicans or Democrats.
Well, I tell you what, if you get that, and what is amazing is that people know the difference.
Yeah, they do.
Because sometimes you hear the same words. One time a student told me, he was praising me for defending the constitutional approach on war and this sort of thing. And I said, and they were anxious to talk with me. And I said, well, so-and-so, as soon as I finished that statement, said the same thing, And I said, why aren't you talking to him too? He says, we didn't believe him.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So
absolutely.
And I think young people sometimes sense truth as well as adults too, because maybe adults, when they have so many agendas that they fudge a little bit, and they're not as acute on picking out the people who are fibbing or lying or involved in money or political power.
Yeah. Well, they sense authenticity as well. I mean, that was the appeal of your campaigns. They sense this is an authentic person. He's not being tested by polls and talking points and everything. But I know we won't need to get off this topic. We'll be watching it with interest, but let's do it for fun. Let's put this last clip on. This is Kim.com. I've talked about him on the show a lot. I really like Kim a lot. I think he's a very, very smart, great entrepreneur who's actually being persecuted. But here's a great tweet from Kim.com. He said, "Give Americans a plot twist that gets them excited to vote. Trump would win by a landslide if he makes RFK Jr. the CIA director. His uncle and dad were murdered by them. Americans hate the deep state and would love for RFK Jr. to splinter the CIA into 1,000 pieces." Boy. So that would be a good story.
That's a pretty strong, short statement to the point. Yeah. That's great.
It is good. So, well, we'll see what happens. But now the second thing we wanted to talk about is a little bit less happy news, and this is something that the New York Times has come out with, and it actually is quite frightening. If we put up that next clip, the New York Times came out with this article, U.S. is investigating Americans who worked with Russian state television. The FBI raided the homes of 2 prominent commentators on Russia state TV channels as part of an effort to blunt attempts to influence November's elections. Now, I thought that maybe I fell asleep and woke up in 2016 because they're reading from the same playbook. All that stuff about the Russian influence election was completely fake. It was made up by Obama and Hillary.
What about that horrible operation they had where they got, what was it, 21 top, 51.
Yeah, that's
51 top people in this country that knew all about top secret and secrecy and all of this, and they all signed a letter.
Yeah,
and
saying
then
that the
it was
laptop
finally,
was fake. Yeah.
Well, after the election, it was discredited and it was all fake. They never even read the letter. And there was no evidence that they were really supporting it.
Yeah, well, they were saying that the laptop is fake, and they signed this letter saying this is a Russian disinformation tool. And then, remember, we talked about it, right after it, polls showed that actually, if Americans hadn't seen that letter, they would have voted more, Trump would have won. So that was interference in the elections by the deep state in the U.S. But nevertheless, now go to the next one. This is chilling, and I'll tell you why, because we've both been on RT a lot. We haven't been employed by them, we're not employed by them, but nevertheless, the Department of Justice has begun a broad criminal investigation into Americans who have worked with Russian state television networks. So I'm not saying being employed with, have worked with their networks. Now, anyone who reads this and does not get an absolute chill going up and down their spines, no matter what you feel about Russia, Dr. Paul, because we have a little thing called the First Amendment, which means we can say whatever the heck we want, wherever the heck we want it, on any network or station we want it, and the government has no power to do anything about it. Nevertheless, they're coming after people, and 2 people that we know. Scott Ritter, who has spoken at our conferences. We know Scott, we've known him for years. And Dimitri Simes Sr., who I knew more than you, but I knew him from the Nixon Center, and he was the editor of the National Interest. A very, very smart guy who we talked about it before. He goes all the way back to Nixon, the Nixon era.
Yeah. Since we're always looking for an ability to get along with people who superficially we would seem to be in an opposite camp, like progressives and bringing people together. But I mentioned to you a little while ago that, when RT was sort of coming on the scene, and we were very much involved, I think, with Middle East politics or whatever. And I said, holy man, maybe today I might have to be very cautious about doing that. But I don't know. My name's on their records, and all I remember, their personnel were decent.
American journalists. They were Americans,
and they seemed to be fair and balanced. It was so different than, say, a liberal TV station that we put up with. I mean, that's nonsense.
I mean, Rick Sanchez, the guy has a long decades career in journalism. Remember the late Ed Schultz? You've been on his show a few times. and I was on the show. These are senior, and Larry King was on RT. He got told me that he was a Putin puppet. But go on to the next one now. This is from the article, and this is chilling because I don't like this sentence. More searches are expected soon, some of the officials said. These are Biden-Harris officials speaking on condition of anonymity. The investigation comes in the wake of the Biden administration's official intelligence findings that Russia's state news organizations, including the global news channel RT, are working with its intelligence agencies to sway elections around the world. Again, we are back in 2016 where the Russians are trying to get Trump elected.
See, when you spoke about the First Amendment, we have a right to do this, and nobody has a right to monitor us and check it out and say the government proves, okay, you can say that. But now they're going to have this big investigation go to find out, are you anti-Russia? Are you pro-Russia?
Yeah.
Or what? Are you pro-American? And it's all, what they do is they shift it from the rule, and the rule is you can say what you want.
Yeah.
It's your opinion.
Yeah.
But this time they put the anti and the pro to figure out, and they can do whatever they want, and they say, well, the pro First Amendment answers all these questions, but they can't do that. They can do whatever they want if they're trying to figure out which side you're on. So it's a mess, and this is of course unless we get Robert Kennedy in as the CIA director, they'll be the enforcers, and they enforce not by the judicial system. The judicial system is way too honest compared to what they need. They want something that doesn't even exist, and they'll take care of it. And I wonder how many assassinations this country's been involved in.
Yeah.
Because, after Kennedy's assassination, I think after the first year, what was it, over 100 people died prematurely, and I'm sure people have written about that, but it makes you wonder.
Yeah.
Tell you what, doesn't reassure us.
Well, I think these are going to be harrowing weeks between now and the election because I think the crackdown is going to be worse. And let's do a couple more from this article just so people can get a sense of what's going on here. The government's investigation is politically fraught, and I highlighted this, reprising the furiously partisan debate over Russia's influence in the 2016 presidential campaign. No, there wasn't a partisan debate. There were lies and there were truth. They lied that the Russians were involved, But here's the other part. By targeting Americans working with news organizations, even if they're state-run, the inquiry could also bump up against the First Amendment's protection. Gee, do you think so? And so here's a...
We'll have to be careful.
Yeah. Let's go to the next one now. I'm just going to do these really quick because the government investigation is not targeting ordinary Americans who watch Russian state media or post about it online. I would say not yet, at least. But rather is focused on individuals intentionally spreading disinformation from Moscow. Now here you have that word disinformation. Intentionally spreading disinformation. Like what? Anything that contradicts what the deep state, what the Biden administration, what the hawks in the Republican administration are saying about Ukraine, for example. People like Doug McGregor, who said Ukraine is losing. People like us that have said this is a stupid policy to go to war with Russia through Ukraine. Well, they'll just say that's all Russian disinformation.
The last speech I gave on the House floor when I was leaving Congress, I said the most important amendment, people pick them and they say, well, isn't it the Second Amendment and property and different things? No, I said, I think the First Amendment is the best because ideas are important. And if you don't have freedom to speak out without being punished or killed or assassinated, we're in big trouble. And that's what's happening here. And the First Amendment, it's sort of like truth has to be removed because it's too much of the enemy of the people who want to do what they're doing to us, that they don't want to hear truth. Truth is something they have to squelch at any time.
Truth is disinformation.
And that's why, would you think that's maybe why they have so much influence on the media?
Yeah.
Why don't they investigate that? Our government involved in our media.
Yeah. How many of our spooks are in the so-called free press in our country? But I want to do a little bit about Symes here from the article, because I think this is important because this is why they're really going after him. So Mr. Symes, 76, has been a fixture of American foreign policy debates since he emigrated from the Soviet Union as a young man in 73. He was an informal advisor on Soviet affairs to President Nixon, who in 94 appointed him to a think tank he founded, now known as the Center for National Interest. Now here's the part I was going to talk about, Dr. Paul. This is why they're going after Dimitri Symes. In 2016, Mr. Symes hosted Mr. Trump, then a presidential candidate, for a speech in which he called for improved relations with Mr. Putin's government. He also introduced Trump to the Russian ambassador at the time. So Symes was doing what diplomats are supposed to do, which is to help improve relations. That's why they went after him. Now go to the next one. This should be chilling to all Americans. Symes said he didn't know the reason for the search, but speculated it was an attempt to stifle anyone who would improve relations between Russia and the United States. And here's the part I underlined. He said his bank accounts had been frozen. Now, he's not guilty of any crime. He's not even accused of a crime. They froze his bank accounts and raided his house.
You know, this reminds me of the Kennedy, JFK, that once they started talking about him, and he wasn't allowed to speak out and do this, I said, oh, how are you going to sort all that out? Then it dawned on me, they did sort it out.
Yeah.
That's when the assassinations came. You know, it isn't, they didn't have any attempt to sort out, you know, really is there collusion, there are crimes, or telling lies, or whatever. It was just that we don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
And that's why, you know, significant of that. And the other thing is with your support and our talking about the CIA and RFK, is that it'll renew an interest. You know, there's a few generations since the 1960s, and even though it was very vivid in my mind, it was years after that I started reading the books, and the books that have done this usually are similar in many ways. Not many of them. Oh yeah, I did read one once that the conclusion was it was just this was the final. This is the final book on it. I forget who read it, the final thing, and it said that Oswald did it. There was no other.
Yeah.
That's the final conclusion, and that was supposed to do it. But it didn't work.
It didn't work.
He couldn't put his stamp on there and says, we don't want to hear the truth. Yeah. They have a lot of evil in themselves, and they resort to it. But there's a limit to what they think they can do.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to close out with one of my last times of reminding everyone what's happening here in just a little over a week. And first, I will say, if you go to ronpaulinstitute.org, you'll see this week's column by Judge Andrew Napolitano. Great column, a good read, and also a sneak preview of what he's going to be talking about at the Ron Paul Institute conference. So you'll get to understand why it's so important to be there and listen to the judge. But also, someone else who we look up to, and to put on that last clip, if you will, again, is Professor John Mearsheimer, who has been one of the best critics of U.S. foreign policy out there. He's on the judge's show all the time. And actually, I got a call from the judge the other day, and he said, you know what? I've had Mearsheimer on my show so many times, I've never met him in person. I can't wait to get to this conference and finally meet my good friend, John Mearsheimer. So that's going to be something to watch, I think. But here's what Professor Mearsheimer said. As far as I'm concerned, the Republicans and Democrats on foreign policy are like Tweedledum and Tweedledee. There's just no difference between them. So you're going to want to watch these two great speeches and all the other great speakers. I was on the phone with our friend Jeff Deist. He's going to be speaking. I talked to him this morning. He's looking forward to it. So I'll put a link in the description to get those tickets. There's still a few days left to get them, and we'll see you on the 31st. Over to you, Dr.
Very
Paul.
good. You know, I like our conferences. I think they're great. We can always improve, and we love what happens because so many people come. A lot of them come back. A lot of people come from long distances, and we always have somebody that has come a long distance, maybe from Europe or wherever. And I think this is makes the point that I certainly work on. How important ideas are. Ideas have consequences, and many others have said this over the many, many years. Ideas are very important. The founders believed this. Ideas were the key to it. And the one thing is that's pretty neat is that if a time has come for it, really, for peace to break out, and in a way, as time has come, it's hard to stop. In our early history, you could say the ideas of what the founders were trying to do couldn't be stopped, except it was messed around with afterwards. I mean, you never have the chance to just get rid of your vigilance, because. But in many ways, I think what we try to do is make sure people think in ideas, and I'll tell you what, the other is the bold use of force. And of course, I don't think that's a very good idea. You have to deal with ideas, but we have to start very early on. If we're parents or friends or school teachers or whatever, you have to start early. But I felt I've made the statement many times that I think people have a natural instinct to not have government breathing down your neck and have all misinformation about economic policy. But then we spend a lot of time outside our official education trying to eliminate the bad thinking that was pumped into our system. So that's what happens when the government controls the educational process. So I think what we're trying to do is at least offer it out there, and there will always be somebody that's going to grab hold of it and say, boy, this is the right way to go. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.